What's going on? Thanks for clicking on this video. I'm gonna share 6 key things that I've learned in grading over 150 cards. And yes, I know some of you grade that many cards in a week, but stick around. I think whether you've graded thousands of cards or you're just contemplating grading your cards, I've got some valuable tips here in this video. All right, thing number 1 I've learned grading my sports card is the home field disadvantage. Let me explain. In sending over 150 cards to get graded, the average grade I have right now is 9.36. It's definitely something that's been improving over time. My first batches were like 9.1 average, where now I'm more 9.4, 9.5 average. I'm hoping to get more into like 9.6, 9.7. My favorite sports teams are all things Seattle. Seattle Supersonics, Seattle Seahawks. And I love to send those types of cards to get graded just because I love them. But I've noticed across dozens of different cards, the average grade I've received of any Seattle-based card is 8.7. 8.7, where ordinarily I'm averaging 9.36. And I've noticed this consistently across multiple submissions, not just like a couple outliers. Because I love those Seattle-based teams so much, I might be looking past the little errors or little problems that I may otherwise see on a card that I don't have that kind of emotional attachment to. Because I think there's just something that, like, at least for me, convinces me that, like, oh yeah, this Seahawks card is gonna get a 10 and it gets an 8. Okay, so thing number 2 I learned is understanding what is the right card to grade and what is the wrong card to grade. Now, that's kind of a blanket statement. It could look differently for different people, whether you do modern, whether you do vintage, whether you're flipping cards, whether you're just collecting, whether you're holding them to sell in a few years. There's a few principles though I think that are important to look at when you're deciding what cards to grade. So one thing I'll flag right off the bat, I deal only in basketball and football and in ultra modern, so I can't speak as much to baseball or vintage. So if you're sending your cards to get graded, you're probably sending them to PSA. PSA is going to be where you get the most value on the secondary market. There's not another grading company that's close in this regard, although we are going to talk about other grading companies in this video. Now with PSA, a lot of times you could end up in a situation where you're just banking on a 10, and if it's a 10 or a bust. So if you're trying to make money grading your cards, which a lot of people are, I would look at the value of a 9. How much is a PSA 9 going for? How does that compare against what you paid for it raw? Let's use a couple just like made up examples. So let's say you have a card that cost $5 raw. That's what it's selling for in the market. Whether or not you pulled it from a pack or you bought it for $5, it's worth $5. So you're into that card $5. And let's say in a PSA 9, it's going for $18. Well, and there are plenty of cards where this is the case. If you grade that card, you're 5 plus 22, you're 27 into that card, and you're only going to get 18 out. You're going almost $10 backwards by getting a 9. And maybe a 10, you get 40 or 50 bucks. Great. But you're losing money. You're going backwards on a 9. These are the types of cards that I think are to be avoided. Now, if you can break even on a 9, let's say you have a $10 card and a PSA 9 is going for 32 bucks. Well, you're, after grading fees, you're about 32 into that card. If you can get 32 back out of it, you're at least washing out in a 9. In this instance, you're not losing, you don't have as much on the line. I think that's a better card to send to get graded. Now, it's harder to do, but you can actually find cards where you make a small profit on a 9. Let's say you have a $40 card and a PSA 9 is going for $68. Well, 40 plus 22, you're into that card $62, and maybe you make 5 or 6 bucks on a 9. I would just summarize by saying, look at the value of a 9. Are you going to lose money on a 9? Just assume you're going to get a 9. Are you going to lose money, or at least you breaking even or making a small margin? Those are the types of cards that are better to send. Okay, the third thing I've learned grading my cards is gem rates. You can go actually to a website called gemrate.com. It's a lot more user-friendly on a laptop or a computer, but you can definitely access it from your phone. But here you can type in the card, and you'll get a database from the 4 major grading companies, PSA, BGS, SGC, and CGC, and look at the gem rates. Or in other words, look at the percentage of cards sent in that got a 10 versus a 9 versus an 8, etc. Looking at a gem rate of a card is a really important factor in deciding whether or not to grade it. Let me give you a couple examples that might shock you. So draft class 2021, let's look at Trevor Lawrence Prism. We all know Prism's a very liquid card. 2021 Trevor Lawrence Prism base has a gem rate of 10%. 10%, whereas look at Justin Fields, same draft class, same year that they were printed, His gem rate is 50%. So clearly, and we don't always know why, but something with the printing process, these are most likely print lines or something wrong happening in the printing process. That's something to understand and know about when you're looking to buy raw cards. If someone's selling some raw Trevor Lawrence Prisms, you need to understand, if you're going to try to grade that card, that you have 10% shot at getting that, at that being a 10. Using gemrate.com is a really good resource. I recommend you do. Let's go to tip number 4. So I mentioned PSA as being market dominant. We all know this. However, I want to talk a little bit about SGC and when it actually might make sense to send cards to get graded with SGC. Now again, remember, I'm dealing in ultra modern basketball, football. So I don't know as much about baseball or vintage, but hear me out here. And just know I haven't done this type of research on hundreds and hundreds of cards. I'm just gonna pick one, Brock Purdy Prism Silver. So using a combination of gem rates and then pulling comps, you can use some data to help influence what grading company might make more sense to send your card to. So let's look at a Brock Purdy Prism Silver. Let's say you have one that you're $200 into raw. Let's look at the data at PSA. PSA 9 going for about $225, so you're approximately a break even on grading and getting to a PSA 9. PSA 10, $750. Obviously a huge upside there with PSA. The gem rate on this card is 54% in a PSA 10 and 36% in a PSA 9. So you have a pretty good shot at a 10. If you've looked at the card and you feel like it's a good condition, you have a pretty good shot at a 10. This is another situation, as so often is the case with PSA, is a kind of a 10 or bust. You're gonna make great money on a 10, you're gonna like maybe break even on a 9. Let's look at SGC. SGC, 43% gem rate, where a 10 is going for about $600. So here you see the ceiling is not quite as high for SGC compared to PSA. But SGC has the 9.5 grade, and the 9.5 grade actually protects a lot of value. Here we have 25% of submissions got the 9.5 grade, which goes for about $375. And the SGC 9 is going for about $220. The prices have kind of been up and down, but I compared them side by side, a PSA 9 and an SGC 9. They're very, very similar, almost indistinguishable in price. Not every card is that way. For some reason, this card is that way in the data. If you have this card, you can shoot your shot with PSA. You have the 54% chance at making a great profit. Or with SGC, if you combine the 43 and the 25, you have a 68% chance of making some profit. 43% of a 10, 25% in a 9.5. So this is an example of SGC, and there's a lot of, and I could probably find a lot of examples like this where the ceiling is a little lower, but the floor is much higher. So it's a little bit of a safer play in having that 9.5 grade. Plus, there are some advantages too to getting your card back in 2 to 3 weeks as opposed to a month or two. Me personally, if I had this card, I had a $200 Brock Purdy Prism Silver. If I looked it over and I felt, yeah, I think this is gonna gem, it looks really good, I'm gonna go to PSA every time. But if I had the card and there were a couple little things that I was like, I don't know if this would get a 10, it might not. That might be a good one to send to SGC to get that 9.5 grade, because maybe it won't get a 10, but maybe it's good enough to get that 9.5 and you at least get some profit out of it. Okay, thing number 5 I've learned in grading my cards is how to find the best raw cards. Now this is something that is a challenge for everybody who grades cards. There are 3 real main sources you can even get cards. One, you can pull them from packs or from breaks. The cleanest you're gonna get a card is obviously by pulling from a pack or from a break. But I think a fallacy a lot of people have is that, oh, if I chase these cards in these packs, they're always gonna be a 10. Not so at all. You could pull that downtown card you're looking for, the Prism Silver card that you're hunting for, but it's got a big print line on it, or it's way off center, and you have an 8 or a 9 anyway. So the second place you could go is online, and you could, at least online, you can look at all the different options you have. You could look at the different images of the cards, obviously find the ones that seem like they're in the best condition. But something to be aware of when you're buying cards online and you're looking to grade cards, if you find a card that you like, go to that seller and see what other cards they have. Look through their page. Are they selling lots of graded cards? Do you see an obvious indication that they have multiple cards on there from the same batch or submission? That's a really good indicator to you that that's someone who sends in cards to get graded. So obviously, someone that sends in cards to get graded themselves, they're not gonna sell a raw card that they thought would be a Gem Mint 10. Are they selling only raw cards? If they are, that's a good indication that they might not grade cards. There are plenty of sellers out there on eBay and other platforms that only sell raw cards, and those are gonna be a great source to find cards that are gradable or grade worthy. And it goes without saying, going in person to shows and shops are a great way to find gradable cards. Shops can be a little tricky because a shop is just not gonna have $100, $200 downtown raw card sitting in their display case that's a Gem Mint 10. A shop is gonna send in cards, especially higher value cards like that they think are gem. But I found with shops, a lot of shops just don't have the time or energy to dig through all these $5, $10 cards and really just look closely and see which ones do we think are gonna gem. So I found that price range, that like $5 to $10 price range, well, sometimes that's not the best price range of cards to send to get graded. I've had multiple instances when I've been able to buy a $5 or a $10 card at a shop and grade it and it gets a 10. Also, don't forget about checking your local Facebook pages and stuff. I've bought multiple cards off people from Facebook in my local area that I've sent off to get graded and have gotten 10s. There are a lot of people out there that either don't know about grading, they're not comfortable with it, they don't want to deal with it, and they'll just sell their cards raw. Those are the types of people that you want to try and find. It's a win-win. They're able to sell their card at a profit. You're able to profit by taking it and grading it. Everybody's happy. Thank you so much for watching. Comment below, what did you think of this video? What are some things you've learned grading your cards? If you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button and find me on Instagram, Danielson Sports Cards. Thanks again for watching. We'll catch you next time.